I'd like to go ahead and call the Monday, July 8th meeting to order. And for the record, Councilmember Zapata will not be in attendance this evening with an excused absence. I would like to ask Mr. Del Ross to lead us in the pledge. Thank you, Mr. Del Ross. The next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Motion by Councilmember Tizer. Do I have a second? Second by Councilmember Wilsey. All those in favor, please raise your hands. And it passes unanimously. Now I will turn this over to Community Development Department, Councilmember Palermo.
Thank you, Mayor Henry. Item number 1, RZ 2019-1432, rezoning from RS12, single-family suburban, to RX, residential mixed use, and CV 2019-1433 and CU 2019-1434, located at 39 and 45 Long Circle, land lot 388.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. This matter tonight is going to be presented by one of our planners, Michael Carterman, so be kind.
Good evening. The first item is RZ 2019-1342, 2019-1434, 2019-1433. The addresses are 39 and 45 Long Circle. Here is an aerial showing both properties. Zoning map showing the RS12 zoning designation, RS12 to the north and west, DX to the east, and RS6 to the south. Here is a future land use map. The proposed area is in the suburban residential character area. The applicant is requesting a rezoning from RS12 to RX in order to build 3 single-family homes. The existing on-site is 1 single-family home and a duplex. These structures would be removed and replaced with 3 single-family homes. Here is an aerial of the property showing Long Circle with Canton Street located to the east, Thompson Place to the north, and Wood Place to the south. Here is a site plan showing the proposed 3 single-family homes. Single-family homes are considered a conditional use within the RX zoning classification. The applicant is also requesting a variance to the Type D buffer requirement to reduce the buffer from 40 feet to 0 feet. Here is a sketch from staff showing the proposed 40-foot buffer if it was not reduced to 0. The Planning Commission recommendation with conditions is the following. The owner-developer shall build 3 residential homes in accordance with the site plan dated April 1st, 2019. The owner-developer shall install a 5-feet sidewalk and 5-feet grass strip on the property frontage at Long Circle as approved by Roswell DOT. Staff recommends denial to the RX zoning classification because it does not comply with a comprehensive plan. Staff condition, if approved by Mayor and Council, the owner-developer shall install a 5-foot sidewalk and a 5-foot grass strip on the property frontage on Long Circle as approved by Roswell DOT. Any questions for staff?
Does council have any questions? Councilmember Palermo.
Thank you, Mayor Henry. This might be more of a question for transportation, but what I'm wondering is if this condition is not included, what would be required of the applicant? In other words, it was my understanding that it would likely be a 5-foot sidewalk that's required, and curious if this is different than the 5-foot grass strip that I would think is required. And so basically and the purpose of my question is I want to understand if this is something unique or if this is just standard straight out of the guidance in the code.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Councilmember Palermo, can you please repeat the question?
Sure. So my question is, I see this staff condition, but if council were to approve this without the staff condition, it's my understanding there'd be a requirement of sidewalks being built. And what I'm wondering, is this different from that? So in other words, if this is not there, my assumption is it'd be a 5-foot sidewalk and then a certain multiple-foot grass strip. And I'm curious if this is different than the requirement in the code.
This is just a standard code requirement anyway.
Okay.
Even if this was not a condition, it would still apply. In certain cases, we try and clarify because Long Circle, this is one of the side streets to Canton Street, and not all of those streets have any existing sidewalk, and if that was the case, we would not ask for it. In that case, by the city code, we would offer the applicant to either pay a fee in lieu of, or if they absolutely want to construct, they can still construct. So we don't necessarily have to make it a condition, it applies anyway, but I guess it can clarify that at least we are asking for a 5-foot grass strip because that's something that can vary.
And that fully answers my question. Thank you.
Councilmember Judy.
So if staff could help me a little bit with this, seeing as there are single-family homes being built on that street, it seems like there was something added to the UDC that doesn't allow staff to recommend approval of this particular project on the street. So we've got them asking for RX for single-family homes versus a R6 or a R6 because staff cannot approve that. So I'm trying to figure out where we are, why we're in this position, and how do we remedy this situation if this is what we want in this area.
Yes, council member. In this particular situation, staff could not allow the applicant to submit a rezoning request for the R6 because section 13.4.3D restricts the acceptance of zoning application in certain zoning classification, and the RS6 being one of those if it's in the suburban residential comp plan category.
So,
I'm
I'm
sorry.
So therefore, the only choice by this applicant to try to get this taken care of was an RX, which doesn't fit the comp plan as well.
That's correct. And the key thing is that the applicant was asking to go for basically 3 units, 1 single family, and the duplex to 3 units, 3 single families, and family lots. And the only viable district was the RX.
So in this situation where you could replace a fairly old duplex and a fairly old house with some 3 possibly really nice houses, this is kind of a code conundrum.
Staff does not have that discretion.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Palermo.
Excellent. Thank you, Mayor Henry. So I'd like to give a little background here because actually I think this is really a very important and very beneficial improvement that we've seen to the community within our zoning code. What happened prior to 2016 is in any suburban residential neighborhood citywide, applicants, developers had the right to request extremely high density within the middle of neighborhoods. And so in 2016, what we did, it was not unanimous, but it was an important initiative of mine, is I really worked hard to really limit and reduce the high density that could be requested within suburban residential areas. So this right here, interestingly enough, is a suburban residential area, and definitely an area where the higher density would be out of character. With that, though, the interesting thing is, when we created that ordinance update back in 2016, we gave an exception. And the exception was if the parcel touched a commercial property. But then the way commercial property was defined did not include DX, which is a downtown historic zoning. So that's what's interesting here. I'd say, if anything, what I'm seeing here is two lessons. One is, I feel RX, actually, I have concerns with that being in suburban residential. And also separately, what I see is this actually really working, going through a proper public process to see. We do not know yet if this applicant will end up being approved or denied, but the fact that there is this public process and this discussion, I feel it is giving council and those that are accountable to the community the opportunity to weigh in and really protect our neighborhoods. What I'd say as I view this site plan, what I'd say is I am absolutely supportive of the applicant's request to build the 3 single-family homes here. So that's something that I think makes sense and fits in knowing the character of the area. I'd say I definitely do not support RX. I think that's something that would create a negative precedent and send really the wrong message. But again, I think if we take a step back from the zoning on kind of how to best accomplish it, if we look at what is the applicant's request, then I think that's something that I'm hoping there'll be support for. What I would like to dig a little deeper in, and I'd like the applicant to be prepared to discuss as well, is number one, I do have sincere concern with having an RS12 right next to an RS6. I know it does happen. There's not many RS6 cases. There's some in this neighborhood. There's not many within the neighborhood. So I would like to discuss the possibility of it being an RS9 property that sits right next to the RS12. That's one thing I want to discuss. And the second that I'm looking forward to hearing from the applicant on is to really understand the buffer request and really just to understand kind of the goals, the vision, and just learning more about how that buffer works and et cetera. So those are the items that I look forward to discussing and hearing tonight.
Thank you. Additional questions from council, comments? Okay, I'd like to open this up to the applicant. If you'd please come forward.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Brendan Walsh. My office address is 1175 Canton Street. My home address is 94 Long Circle, which is just down the street from the property that we are discussing tonight. First of all, I want to thank you guys' time for reviewing this project and look forward to getting into some of these details that you guys were already discussing and hopefully provide a clear answer of how we're here and where we'd like to get to. Just a little bit about me before we get into the specifics. I founded my business in 2009 here in Roswell. As I mentioned, my office is right here on Canton Street. I focus on infill development in areas that are walkable and given the ability to create unique architecture. I think you'll see that with some of the product that I'm going to share with you tonight. I also serve on the City of Roswell's Design Review Board. A couple of the developments that I've done here in Roswell: Providence and Historic Roswell, Providence and Historical Roswell Phase 2. Some of you are familiar with those projects. This is a list of single-family custom homes similar to what I'm proposing tonight that I've built in and around downtown Roswell. As you can see, several are completed and several under construction right now. Here's just a sample of the type of product that we build. As I mentioned, we're a full custom builder, so I'm not going to share anything specific about the plans tonight, but you're getting a little taste of what we would like to do when we get into the custom detail of the project. Let's discuss the property itself a little bit more. So it's 25,000 square feet, which is an important number here. It's about 200 feet to Canton Street. This is the existing property. As mentioned, it has two structures on the property itself. One is a duplex, which is built in 1965, which is technically a non-conforming structure in the RS-12 zoning. And the other one is a regular single-family residence built in 1957. There's a picture of the duplex as it currently sits, and a picture of the single-family home as it currently sits. A little bit more about Long Circle, just to follow up in more detail of what Michael presented. It's a connecting street, starts on Canton Street and actually terminates onto Thompson Place. It's a mix of zoning on the street with the DX facing Canton Street, and then on the north side of the street you have RS-12, on the south side of the street you have RS-6. The mixed-use development that's up front has some residential condos, office space, and some light retail. There's a picture of the office building, which this is adjacent to the property, part of the mixed-use developments. There's a picture of the home to the west of this proposal, another home that I finished about a year and a half ago. Long Circle itself is filled with residential properties. It's a street that is going through a transition phase right now. As you can see, most of the homes are built in the 50s and 60s. Of the 18 homes that are on the street, 12 of them have either been developed or in the process of being redeveloped as we speak. So there's a little map of Long Circle. The ones with green stars are completed homes. The ones with blue stars are either under construction or in a planning or development phase. As you can see, I've got 39 and 45 Long Circle starred there tonight. The current zoning is residential single-family, 12,000 square foot lots, as we discussed. The duplex is a non-conforming structure on 39 Long Circle. So going through this process of what we were trying to figure out is the best fit for this property, we went through several renditions. We went through the zoning code trying to figure out what was the best character fit for this. And so let me walk you through what my thought process was there. As you can see from my previous pictures in the single-family custom homes, architecture and street appeal are very important to me and my business. We really wanted to fit the character of the neighborhood and create strong curb appeal. A lot of these tie back into new urbanism design standards, which some of you guys are familiar with. Engage the street with front porches, hide the garages as much as we can. I think you see that in the site plan here. To bring up the suburban residential that Michael and Matt discussed briefly is, here's an area map of Roswell. As you can see, it's dominated by suburban residential, which is the dark green color with pockets of commercial corridors in between. I think that's what makes this property really unique. It falls in the suburban residential character area, but when you really look into it, where that red star is where the property is. It almost fits more into this historic area of downtown. And you'll see with a lot of the projects that I've built off of Wood Place, Long Circle, Thompson Place, it's all about walkability. And so if you look at the walkability of those suburban homes in the character area, they fit a little bit more with an historic town center type mold and everything that's being redeveloped off of Canton Street. But looking at the redevelopment options, I looked at this in 3 different lights. And I'm going to go through those in a little bit of detail right now. We could take the existing structures that are on site, tear those 2 houses down, build 2 larger homes. We would not be going in front of you guys for this rezoning process. We would not be required for any stormwater requirements, no infrastructure improvements. So those are the pros from a developer's eyes. The cons, there's more risk in trying to sell the larger homes. On the other side of it, I think the character worked with that, but ultimately I don't think it's the best. And that's why I'm here in front of you guys tonight, because I want what's best for this street and what's best for Roswell. Another process we could look at here would be to keep or to demo both, or to keep the duplex and to demo one of the structures. We could build 1 new house. Something that I could look at is adding an accessory unit, which would require a conditional use approval from you guys, but keeping the 1 duplex property, maybe adding the accessory unit, turning into 3 rental income properties. No stormwater requirements, no infrastructure improvements. Again, I think the biggest negative about that is it's a bad character fit for the street. I just don't think it looks good with what else is going on with the rest of the street, which has led to the 3 new single-family homes that I'm proposing in front of you guys tonight. So I think that's the best character fit for the neighborhood. selling of the 3 smaller homes, which is what the market is demanding now, and the walkability. I think the cons, from my perspective, is a rezoning process, which is time and money. There's stormwater requirements that I'll be required to meet as well, and then some of the infrastructure improvements that were mentioned. So that's led to our site plan, which you can see here, which goes back to those new urbanism standards. As you can see here, we've tucked those garages out of sight as much as we can. To give you a little update on this site plan here, the green obviously is green space, the gray is your driveways, the light brown is your house footprint. As I mentioned, these are perfect rectangles right now. When we get into the architectural process, we will not be building perfect rectangles, I can promise you that. The red are the 2 porches, and the dark brown are the detached garages that sit to the rear of the property. Here's a rendering. The house on the left that you see there is the existing home of the picture that I showed you earlier, and then going up the street towards Canton Street would be the potential new type of product that we would like to build. As you can see, front porches. These would sit a little closer to the street than where 55 Long Circle sits there now, but I think that the way that they cascade down the street and the way that they engage the street is a better fit. And this would be looking at it from the office building side, looking down the street. So what are we here for tonight, and why are we requesting the zoning, and how do we get here? So we are changing from an RS12 to an RX. Our biggest difficulty with doing this is it ideally set up fit for an RS6. Unfortunately, with some of the previous code recommendations, we're no longer allowed to apply for an RS6. So the next best thing that we could do was an RX zoning. RX zoning is not allowed in the suburban residential, which is why staff has to give a disapproval as far as their recommendation goes. So we've set this up to match RS6 as much as we can under the RX zoning ordinance. Part of the RX zoning ordinance creates conditional use because you're allowed to build 7 different building types in the RX zoning code. We are not proposing anything else besides single-family housing on these 3 lots, so I wanted to make that clear in my letter of intent and clear in the process tonight. Feel single-family is the best use for this site. The removal of the buffer. So this is one that I think can be a bit of a challenge when you look at it from afar, but when you really dive into the details, I think the removal of the buffer is what creates the best character for this. As Michael pointed out, that buffer would be on the rear of the property in that 40 feet, essentially where we're wanting to put our detached garages. And so in the rest of this area, and you saw in the pictures that I provided of other homes that I've built, we're pushing those detached garages to the rear for 2 reasons. One, for the architecture. The other is it creates a buffer itself between adjoining homeowners. It gives them privacy and a screening between the 2 properties, doing it with a garage rather than a living space. And so this is an area where I think the removal of the buffer in the rear actually creates better character for the front-facing part of the street, which is what would be the most visible. I know I don't have any of the neighbors here tonight that are adjacent to this property, but I've spoke with both a resident to the north and my client to the west, and everyone was quite pleased to see this project being proposed on the current site. So in summary, I think what this does is this project creates another opportunity to improve the quality of life in Roswell while not putting any additional burden on the city or the residents. As Alice mentioned, there's already 3 units on site with the duplex. We're looking to keep 3 units, but just transition to single family rather than duplex. So I appreciate your guys' time tonight. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Yes.
Does council have any questions? Councilmember Palermo.
Excellent. So first of all, Mr. Walsh, I think great presentation. So great information in the slides, and really appreciate what you put together here. Can we actually go to the site plan?
Yes.
Just that high-level site plan. So what we have right here is, the request for 3 single-family homes, which initially right here I am supportive of. But I guess the concern I have is with the way you set it up, and I want to understand a little more, is on the left, and it looks like actually you're even the owner there, but for me it's important for both president, but then also for future owners as well, is you have the RS12, and then right next to that, not only is it potentially RS6, but the smallest of the three properties. And so I guess my first question I want to address and discuss is hearing your thoughts on if that one were to be RS9 and be 9,000 square feet, which actually officially fits in with the comp plan, and then therefore having two RS6 properties in between the RS9 and the DX.
Yeah, I would be in support of that. I juggled that and thought about that as far as the application process goes. My biggest concern was in doing that, creating confusion in the application
Sure.
with trying to show the RS6 and the RS9.
Right.
I thought that'd be something that'd be better dialogue here tonight and through Planning Commission and through the neighborhood meeting. So I'd certainly open to, right now, that the properties are just split evenly. They're all about 66 or 67 feet wide and some change. And so as you can see, with a lot of the projects down here and why you get other non-conforming lots in this area is when these streets were developed, nothing was perpendicular, nothing was parallel. And so on the far right-hand side, you're closer to 140, 150 feet deep. On the far left-hand side, you're closer to like 120 feet deep. And so I would be open to increasing Lot 1's width to get to 9,000 square feet and decreasing the width of Lot number 2 and Lot number 3.
Okay, thank you for answering that first question. So I think I would definitely have a lot more comfort knowing if it was RS9 being next door to the RS12. So now, secondly, I want to talk a little more about the buffer request. So I think you were pretty clear in the reasoning, and just the way you see it is, if anything, it's creating a little more of a buffer with the privacy. You mentioned having talked to neighbors and engaged neighbors. Did that include the ones that would be behind the
It
property?
include Ms. Wagner, who's to the northeast up there.
Okay.
Knocked on door for the Leonards there and did not get a response, and did not talk to JCY Properties. That's investments. They hold that for a rental. Also talked to, it's not on there, but where it says Joe Fitz is actually a gentleman named Chris Ruskin who owns that property. Spoke to him about it. He kind of butts the property at a corner pin there, but not thoroughly. And the Kramers, who are my clients to the west, discussed with them as well.
Excellent, thank you. And remind me too, I believe, these are garages, not carriage houses? Or they are carriage houses?
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
I'm not applying for apartments or anything above the garages. Now, I will say, we have clients that do home offices up there quite frequently, or bonus rooms. Most of my clientele is empty nesters, so they don't need the space in the house, but over the holidays, when the kids are home, it's a space to go, but usually no kitchens or anything like that up there in those spaces.
Thank you.
Councilmember Judy.
This is going to be for staff. So does the buffer stay the same? Would the buffer stay the same in an R6 or R9 versus an RX, the back buffer?
We'll double check that. But I believe the buffer comes into play more if you have a more intense zoning versus a less intense. It would be the same.
It would be the same?
Yes.
So they still would need the variance on R6 or R9 if we went that direction?
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
thank you.
Additional comments, questions from council? Thank you, Mr. Walsh. I'll open this up to the public. Is there anyone in the public that would like to come forward and speak? Seeing no one approach, I'll bring it back to council. Do we have a motion or further discussion? Councilmember Palermo?
I would like to make a motion, if staff could actually go back to the staff recommendations. So now, Mr. Davidson, if I'm making a separate motion, do I need to deny a request, or can I just go ahead and motion to approve what I'd like to approve in my motion?
You can motion to approve.
Okay, thank you. I would like to motion to approve a rezoning And I would like the rezoning to be two separate zonings. So approve RS9, which would be the property directly next to the RS12, which would be the west of the three properties. I think you called it Lot 1.
Yep.
And then motion to approve the other two to be RS6. And I would like to motion to approve the buffer variance. And I want to actually ask staff, I also want to include staff's other conditions that don't contradict or conflict with these motions. And staff, is there anything I'm missing from your perspective, or I'll ask the applicant, do you feel in your request there's anything here that's not being accomplished from what I've just motioned?
I think the challenge where I can work with transportation is the sidewalk thing. We do this with all of the homes that we do down here. It's a challenge because there's no other sidewalk down there. And so no one wants to be the only house on the street with sidewalk, meaning there's no sidewalk to the east or no sidewalk to the west. This one is just let me take you back. Can you go back to my picture? I'm sorry, just my PowerPoint. I think you catch it in the picture of the office building here. Go back up, Michael. Right there. You can see the sidewalk. Sidewalk stops. Oh, there it is. The sidewalk stops
We
right
actually
there.
can't see it. Oh, there it is.
The
Okay.
sidewalk stops right there, so we can't get all the way connected to Canton Street with sidewalk. As someone that lives on the street and has 4 young children, I would love to have sidewalk all up and down the street. I think the challenge is the design of it and how that gets tied in. So I don't know if there's a way that I can work with transportation on the best solution to that. Now, I know this adjacent property owner has an old detention pond or stormwater outlet that's there, and so if there was room to go beside them, or if that's even in the city's right of way, there, and there was a way that we could tie sidewalk all the way in, I just don't want to, from a design standpoint, to look goofy with sidewalk kind of hanging out there on its own.
So I appreciate you sharing that. That's the dialogue I do want to have. I'd say with that, given that it is a pretty small gap right there, and that there is sidewalk as you get further up to Cannon Street, I don't think I'd feel comfortable not including the 5-foot sidewalk requirement, but I would support more the leaving some more flexibility around that 5-foot grass patch. Is that something you'd find is at least
I think
helpful
that would give
compared
us
to the
more
current?
flexibility. I think it's just going to be, I don't know if we can pull up Google Maps here, but that black
I
mailbox.
actually have Google Maps up, so I can.
Yeah, so you can see where that black mailbox is, and it looks like there's a little charter or cable pedestal right behind that. That's where that concrete infrastructure is for the mixed-use development next door. And so I think if we have more leeway in the grass strip, we can make that transition look like it was more meant to be rather than going from a 5-foot. Because I don't think there's any way you could fit a 5-foot grass strip and a sidewalk right there. And so have more leeway where it looked more gradual. I think it could, I think it would look better ultimately and still serve the purpose of giving people an area to walk down the street.
And so I'm certainly supportive of adjusting my motion on that condition, where the 5-foot sidewalk is required, and that the applicant would work with staff to see from the grass strip on an appropriate amount. I don't want to just cancel it, but I do want to give you the chance to work with staff and for staff to kind of weigh in on what can make sense. Does that give enough direction to staff on my thought process?
Yes, it does, and we appreciate that. We want to keep the sidewalk, 5-foot sidewalk requirement in. For the grass strip, we could do the minimum, which is 2 feet, and we would also allow them to meander around any fixed objects.
And what I'm comfortable with just having the 5-foot requirement, and that you'd work with the applicant, and if 2 feet's appropriate, great. If 3 feet's appropriate, great. And you and the applicant would work through that piece of it. That's my thought process and my
Yes,
motion.
we could work with the applicant on that.
And for the applicant, is that something that you feel gives you the flexibility that
Yes.
that helps? Okay.
Okay, Councilmember Palermo, that's your motion.
That is some.
Would you mind repeating it?
I'd be
for us?
happy
Thank
to
you.
repeat it. And can we go back to that slide that we're on? So, motion to approve rezoning from RS12 to RS9 on the lot that I described earlier, and RS6 on the two other lots that are closer to Canton Street, and including staff's conditions that don't conflict with the motion I just stated. And with this one being edited to say the owner/developer shall install a 5-foot sidewalk and a grass strip that staff with the applicant will work together on to ensure is fitting. Is that fair? Does that give enough guidance to staff and the applicant? For the city attorney, there's a way you'd like to better articulate that, or would you like to get with staff on?
Well, I believe Mr. Davidson would like to offer.
And I was going to say, and include the buffer variance.
Yes, and the buffer variance was within my original motion. Thank you.
Okay, we've got a motion by Councilmember Palermo. Do we have a second? Councilmember Wilsey? Second. All those in favor, please raise your hands. It is Councilmember Grower, Councilmember Wilsey, Palermo, and Judy. All those opposed, please raise your hands. And Councilmember Tizer is going to abstain. So the motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Item number 2, approval of a text amendment to the Unified Development Code, Section 4.3, Building Type Standards, and Section 4.5, Allowed Uses Regarding Mixed Use. This is the second reading. This was deferred from the June 24th, 2019 Mayor and Council meeting, among other meetings.
Mr. Davidson.
Thank you. This is an ordinance to amend the Unified Development Code by changing Section 4.3 Building Type Standards and Section 4.5 Allowed Uses. Now, therefore, the Mayor and Council of the City of Roswell, Georgia, pursuant to their authority, do hereby amend the Unified Development Code, text of which is incorporated herein by reference, and if approved, this would be the second reading.
Thank you, Mr. Davidson.
Yes, Mayor and Council, as was mentioned, this is an amendment to the Unified Development Code related to mixed use. At the first reading, this is what was presented by staff. The first reading including an amendment to Section 4.3 building types that it be amended to indicate that in the mixed use district and the CX commercial mixed use district, a minimum of 2 building types must be used within the development, and one of which must be commercial unless a mixed-use building is used. The second item that was included in the first reading was that building type, Section 4.3, the building type standard be amended by removing townhouse building type from the CH commercial heavy zoning district. Section 4.5 was also proposed to be amended. The allowed use, the use table, be amended to remove townhouse use as a permitted use in the CH, the commercial heavy zoning district. Language was added at the first reading as follows. Section 4.5 to amend the use table to change in the commercial heavy district for townhouse and two-family use to be a conditional use instead of a permitted use. Section 5.5 was also proposed to amend the use table, which would change in the DX zoning district for townhouse use to be a conditional use instead of a permitted use. Also at the first reading, these changes were added. Townhouse and two-family shall be a conditional use in the CX mixed-use district. Townhouse will be a conditional use in the DX downtown mixed-use district. As was mentioned, this item was deferred on June 24th. There was some discussion regarding amendment to the intent statement for the NX, the CX, and the DX to add percentages. And it was amended, it was deferred because this discussion occurred for the first time at that meeting. This is basically the intent statement for the NX neighborhood mixed-use district. And I won't read the whole thing, but it basically says that NX is intended primarily to provide for neighborhood, service, retail, and commercial uses. The second is the CX commercial mixed-use district. And the intent of this district is to provide for a variety of residential, retail, service, and commercial uses. The third is the DX Downtown Mixed Use District, and the DX is intended to provide a variety of residential, retail, service, and commercial uses within the downtown area. One of the things that came up at the meeting on the 24th was regarding Teasley Place located in the city of Alpharetta. We did contact the city of Alpharetta and found kind of the following information: that the code did not restrict density. The parcel is not zoned for mixed use. It is a standalone building in the downtown core. It was zoned C2 in 2015 to allow for 24 condominiums over retail and restaurants. The density is 16 units to the acre, and the building height is 6 feet. If any of you have seen the building, it's approximately 4 stories. We also get some information regarding mixed use from the city of Alpharetta. The future land use map identifies areas that are appropriate for future mixed use. Outside of the downtown, a minimum of 25 acres is required. The downtown zoning regulations were approved in 2015. The DT, Downtown Mixed Use Zoning category, was included in that approval. It is 10 units to the acre by right, but if you want to go over the 10 units, you have to seek a conditional use approval. There's no cap with a conditional use. You can ask for as high density as you think appropriate. The maximum height is 4 stories, and there's no minimum acreage as it is for outside of downtown. Staff recommendation is approval of the second reading as was presented at the first reading, and including the additions that were added. Are there any questions?
Does council have any questions? Yes, Councilmember Palermo.
Thank you, Mayor Henry. So this is obviously something this council has discussed a lot. I think it's been almost a year now, and I think this is perhaps our 11th or 12th time it's been on the agenda. I'm losing track, but we've had a lot of fruitful discussions more recently, especially. And I remember actually looking back to probably 5 or 6 times ago when we had discussed it. We did discuss that difference regarding the acreage, and realizing we definitely have some different situations than Alpharetta from an acreage standpoint. But at the same time, we do have important issues that we need to solve and improve. And examples of those issues that we have in Roswell are, we have these mixed-use zonings. Because keep in mind, that's different than residential. We have true, pure residential zonings, but we've got mixed-use zonings, which are in key areas, typically in the commercial corridors, et cetera. And these mixed-use zonings, what we've been seeing is 100% residential, 96% residential, et cetera. And here are some examples of that. So we have on Highway 9, south of the square, we have quote-unquote canopy. It's the very large area that was clear-cut to become 100% townhomes. That is a mixed-use zoning. They never had to come in front of council. They never had to have a public process with public input, et cetera. Under the current code, the way it's currently written, they were allowed to just clear cut that and put up nothing but townhomes. Swallowit on Green Street, not a commercial corridor, but obviously a downtown area. We have Swallowit the Hollow, and we have Greenwoods. Those are both becoming townhomes with the mixed-use zoning that did not need to come in front of this council for any approval. It did not need to go through a public process for public input. Another example is Mansell Road, pretty much in between Highway 9 and Crossville. A lot of area clear cut there to put up 100% townhomes, more quote-unquote mixed use with the way our zoning currently works. So I've stated many times before that I have 2 issues with this, and one of those issues is the public process part of it. This council, those that are accountable to the residents, to the taxpayers, it should be coming in front of this board. It should be coming in front of the public and looking for input. That was actually accomplished by a compromise discussed by this council probably about a month ago by now, or whenever that first reading. And so that's an improvement. That the fact that we're going to create a conditional use for townhomes or duplexes in mixed use does create that public process opportunity, which I think is fantastic. Much better than the first 8 or 9 times we discussed it publicly, and certainly much better than what's in the code. The second issue comes down to setting proper expectations. So as Ms. Wakefield just showed, within our code, it specifically shows intent, specifically states primarily. So for example, we had a property come forward, it was zoned, they requested to rezone to CX, commercial mixed use, and they proposed a quote-unquote mixed-use development that had 96% residential, with it mainly being a multifamily and townhome development. And what I'll say right now is by us not clarifying and showing that there should be a percentage spelling it out, then this council is to blame for those expectations, because what ends up happening is you end up having a developer that is surprised that there's such heavy opposition, so many different emails, et cetera, about not wanting this 96% residential property in their mixed-use zoning. And then vice versa, you have residents being surprised, this is mixed use, isn't it clear, et cetera. It's not fair to either the developer nor the residents. So what I initially had been pushing for was I wanted to include a conditional use threshold that said if it is not above this percentage square foot non-residential, then they have to officially spell that out and request that conditional use. I didn't have majority support for that. So what I've adjusted my request and hope this body will see as a compromise, that within that intent statement, we just add a sentence spelling out the percentage. So for example, CX, at the beginning of the definition, it calls out that it's primarily for commercial and retail, something along those lines. So we just add one sentence at the end, making it very clear to residents and very clear to developers what the intent is. Doesn't necessarily mean that has to be exactly what ends up being developed, but at least we're fairly setting expectations on what that intent is. So I certainly, again, I support the improvements that were made from the first reading, but I think it is crucial to add percentages as well to send the right message to residents and to send fair disclosure on intent to developers. So that's what I'd like to discuss with this body and really hear what different concerns this body might have about spelling out the intent that's actually already written within our code.
Additional comments, questions from council? Okay, I'll open it up to the public. Is there anyone in the public that would like to come forward and speak? Yes, ma'am, please come forward.
Good evening. My name is Sally McKenzie, and I live at 47 Goulding Place. I just want to really, I think Councilmember Palermo said it very well, but the stated goals of the UDC, one of the goals was to make the city's development vision clearer to everyone, both residents and developers. Unfortunately, the UDC has actually made things more confusing. So adding a metric that more clearly defines, quote, primarily commercial/retail district, end quote, would probably be welcomed by everyone and would be true to the original intent of the UDC. I want to add that I think this is a great step, but I think that we can put Roswell back in the driver's seat when it comes to working with developers and investors who when it comes to working with them, if we can control density and intensity. Right now, putting them in charge of that one key component puts them in charge, period. What developer is not going to go for as much as they can when they can? And with our wording and with unrestricted density overnight, the unintended consequences are everywhere, and Councilmember Palermo listed some great examples. But unless we can control the density, I think this is a great step, a needed step, but we will still struggle, and there will still be contentiousness when we are working with developers and outside interests. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to come forward and speak? Seeing no one approach, are there additional questions, comments by council? Councilmember Judy.
So I'm not really sure what is being proposed here. I think I understand somewhat, but my issue here is this, is that we've thrown out numbers over the last 12 meetings. We're putting things up for legislation that I don't think we have clear answers on yet. And if we're going to fix the UDC, close the loopholes, all those things that I hear all the time, I think we need to do it right. And doing it by throwing something in, we just saw in the last situation and where a developer was actually more confused by the process by something that was put in post-UDC than clarified. And it might have done what Councilman Palermo and others wanted it to do. But again, if we're going to do it, instead of having a answer that, hey, this does what I wanted it to do, why don't we make sure if we're going to fix UDC and fix these loopholes, then do it correctly. And a one-size-fits-all statement or one-size-fits-all percentage, I don't think does it. I've asked folks in other cities, I've asked staff, I've asked experts. Nobody can give me, hey, this works. So I really don't know what we're trying to do here by putting something up after 12 meetings that is just, nobody's really sure what it is. We're just doing it just to do it. I'd rather go back to the drawing board, pass this as is, and staff recommends, and say, all right, if we're going to do this, let's do this right. Let's look at all these mixed-use parcels within the city, because we can do that, and say what's appropriate for these different areas, and come to a conclusion with expert opinion, because I'm certainly not a zoning expert, but our staff does have degrees in it, and they seem to think, hey, this isn't the way to go. So for me, unless I can understand it a little more, I really think we should pass this as is tonight, go back to the drawing board over the next month or couple months and do it right. I mean, I think just because it's hey, a headline, we don't need to do it right the second. We need to get it right. So that's where I am.
Additional comments? Yes, Councilmember Grower.
I was supportive of it last time in the first reading. I think the way staff's recommended, I think I'd be supportive of. I'm not comfortable tonight adding the intent statements. This is the first I've heard of the intent statements and the addition of those this late in the game. So that's not something I can support, but I would be supportive of the way it was written in the first reading.
Additional, yes, Councilmember Palermo.
Thank you, Mayor Henry. So 2 clarifications was, one, it was actually the last council meeting, which I believe was on the 24th, is where I brought up the goal of the compromise of adding into the intent statements, which I also sent in an email to this body as well. But more importantly, I think let's have this discussion. I think I'm not understanding what it's looking to accomplish, or will we do it right? I think first off, we need to just ask ourselves a simple question. do we want mixed-use properties to be used as 99% residential or 100% residential? And I'll say right off the bat, I believe there will be some exceptions where I think that will make sense. And if it's an exception that makes sense, I will support it being 100% residential. But what is our goal when we're thinking big picture of what we want from mixed use? And so that is, I think, what we need to discuss here, because we have zoning types that are 100% residential. They're very clear. If somebody comes in and requests an RTH, then residents fully understand what they're requesting is to be 100% townhomes. We have apartment zonings. We have RS4, RS6, RS9. We have all these different zoning types that are purely residential. Mixed use, we have in our code specifically calling out primarily commercial and or retail. And so therefore, where is the concern with just addressing an intent, a goal? And again, notice that the key word is intent. So it's not saying requirement. It's not saying that someone won't have the ability to apply for it, but it's just saying, let's go ahead and just show an intent. And 25% is a number that was pretty modest in what was provided by staff in a previous meeting, either probably the June 24th meeting, if not earlier. Where we get into successful mixed-use developments in other communities, and multiple of them being around 25%, and a number of them being higher. The one that was not was one up in Forsyth County, but that I do feel should not be the standard here. And again, we have in doing this to add it to the intent, we're still giving this body the flexibility to support when it should be that higher residential. But I guess just what I'm not hearing is there any motivation or any interest in making our mixed-use zonings 100% residential? I haven't heard that. I don't think anybody up on this council feels that way. And if I'm right, then let's go ahead and actually put a percentage in there.
Councilmember Judy.
So in no way, shape, or form do I think a mixed use should be 100%. I also don't think that what you're saying around 25%, some are more, some are less. So I am completely against percentage, across the board percentage. I am having a legal background and going to law school for 3 years, I understand that you can say intent. Well, the intent of something, if you put that in a statement, that holds weight within a court, and that might even be more dangerous, I believe, than putting a percentage on it on just how somebody reads it. And, that's something that I don't practice law, but I, think that is, for me, I would look at that and say, well, that's even more dangerous. So for me, if we're going to do this right, I think we need to pass this as is. It does one of your goals, which is bringing it to a public forum. It also does another goal, which means there can only be one building type in the development. So there's two. And then let's look at what MX is. Let's look at what RX is. Let's look what NX is, because an NX on a property that's 1.5 acres is a lot different than a property that's 15 acres. And so you're looking at different locations and this, that, and the other. So I'm just against the one-size-fits-all, throw this in there thing. So I will support this as is, and also really be, as we did with the Historic District Master Plan, we saw an issue, let's go fix it. Let's figure out what we need to do here and get it done. So in no way am I saying this shouldn't be looked at further, or should a mixed use be 100% residential.
Additional comments from council. Councilmember Tizer?
Thank you, Mayor. If I remember the zoning map, there's not a lot of properties that fall into these categories where we were concerned about percentages. A couple of quick questions to Ms. Wakefield. Alpharetta, we've heard a lot of comparison there. In their downtown mixed-use zoning, do they have a percentage?
I don't believe so, sir.
And I've looked and tried to find places that have them. What I'd prefer to do is look at each of the properties that we're concerned with and do a little bit more like what Alpharetta has done, and that is, help to master plan those particular properties as it's appropriate for us to do. That seems to be the most successful way to get there. I think the legislation as it's written from the first reading solves a lot of the immediate concerns that people have, that I certainly have. And so I'm in favor of passing that tonight. And then if we want to start looking at all the individual parcels that are involved here, then let's look at those and determine what we should or would like to see in those areas and go out and see if we can, do the best we can to recruit for it.
Additional comments from council? No further comment. I'll entertain a motion.
So I guess I think I just did the math and heard three voices that would not support the percentage tonight. What I'm trying to wonder is there any additional language added to the intent statement that would gain support tonight? Because what we an example is, again, CX, it specifically says the intent is this will be primarily commercial and retail, yet what the east side of Roswell got is a lot of trees cut down for 96% residential, which was majority multifamily and townhome. So because I actually brought up after listening to Planning Commission, brought up with staff, is the fact that it says the intent is that give the ability where it shouldn't be allowed to be requested? And the answer was no. It's just an intent, so they still have the ability to request it, and this council still has the ability to approve that. So I get that, and that's why I do see just adding something to the intent statement is really a compromise, because again, I do believe no one up here wants 100% residential on our mixed-use zonings. So I guess that's a question, Mayor, I'll throw out to this council. Are there any additional statements within that within the intent statements this council would support, even if it doesn't have a number percentage?
Additional comments from council? Councilmember Wilsey.
Yes, I guess my comment is that I think the way that it's written, it does take care of one of our primary concerns, is that mixed use would include some commercial. And I agree with the comments from other council members that the right percentage depends on the size of the lot. It depends on where it is in the city. I'm not opposed to, further study and looking at some of those properties and master planning or coming back with some solid fact-based recommendations. But right now, I just feel like these are percentages that are being thrown out with no backing or data to prove that they actually work. So again, I would support it as written and would support further study at the properties that we're most concerned about.
Councilmember Palermo.
Thank you, Mayor Henry. So now the fact that this does create the need of, or the requirement of having something commercial, it was actually brought up by Planning Commission when they unanimously supported that there should be percentages added, was the way it's written is literally you could have a development that just builds a little photo booth, and that little tiny photo booth would meet the requirements of the commercial requirements. So it could be a photo booth surrounded by nothing but townhomes. So I feel that's not really addressing it. And again, for looking at where we're seeing different numbers. And so again, this is something that staff presented during the first reading, but you've got examples with being Town Brookhaven, it's 25.5% non-residential. You've got Pinewood Forest in Fayette County, you've got 25.8% non-residential. You've, in fact, staff put together an estimate for the Southern Post project, which is Southern Skillet. And that will actually be 35, that's staff's expecting or estimating that they'll be 35% non-residential. And then Avalon, staff did not come up with a percentage, but just showed what an enormous amount of commercial compared to residential. So we've got those examples. As I've mentioned, the one example that staff provided that did not meet the 25% minimum was purely that one in Forsyth County. So I think it's pretty clear in what we're seeing, examples in the marketplace, that 25% is a good rule of thumb. But again, it's more than that, because it's a pretty clear, easy number to understand, but also 25%. It's not what we're not planning is having it be a hard and fast rule. It's just purely an intent. So I'm again hearing all the different voices. I'm hearing there's not support for percentages. I certainly hope that we could find a way to get there, but it doesn't sound like that's the case.
Councilmember Judy.
Real quick on let's compare apples to apples and oranges to oranges. Nobody is saying all those percentages. We're taking, 5-6 percentages that are thrown out, which are on mostly fairly big properties or projects. What I'm worried about is the 1.5 acre lot or the 1 acre lot or the 2.5 acre lot. One size does not fit all on this thing. And so what we need to do is we need to take a closer look, and we will, and figure out what's best. But one size fits all. You can't sit here and throw out percentage of places it's not apples to apples. So that's just unfair comparison. So again, I will support second reading, and we will take a closer look at this, just like we did other things that we've said we would.
Councilmember Tizer.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't think this should end with this piece of legislation, and I'd like to issue a challenge to Councilmember Palermo. You have the most experience with ComDev. I think you've been doing it for a little over 3 years now, and would like to see if you could get with the staff and see if, by looking at the specific properties involved, we might be able to find the next step in this process by looking at the specific properties or types of properties or sizes of properties, whatever that kind of looks like. And that way we're not talking in abstract, we're talking in actual, and we can potentially get the right things for the different parts of Roswell. I think we've taken care of the issue of somebody can just come build a whole bunch of townhomes by making that conditional. But I would issue that request, as a liaison to bring back some of those suggestions in the next few months.
If I might make a suggestion, Councilmember Palermo, I would put as part of your motion that the conversation continues with staff guidance and that it will come back to a committee meeting. So, Councilmember Palermo, are you ready to make a motion?
I am. I'd much prefer to be having a motion updating the intent percentages, because I do believe it would send the right message, and even for the smaller properties when it's just purely an intent. But that being said, what I motion to approve the second reading as written from what was approved in the first reading, and using the mayor's recommendation and Councilmember Tizer's recommendation, I'll include in the motion that I will work with community development staff to look at sets of properties or find some way to determine and make sure that this discussion is kept alive to hopefully come back with some legislation that will get majority support.
I would also suggest that you include it as a committee agenda item at a future date.
And that community development and I will include that together as a committee item in the future.
Thank you, Councilmember Palermo. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Tyser and Councilmember Judy. All those in favor, please raise your hands, and it passes unanimously. Next, we will go to transportation, and that would be Councilmember Grower.
Thank you, Mayor. Item number 3 tonight, approval of text amendment to the City of Roswell Code of Ordinances, Chapter 22.3, parking restrictions by adding Section 22.3.7 to establish and permit paid on-street parking in designated areas of the City of Roswell. This is the second
Mr.
reading.
Davidson.
Thank you. This is an ordinance to amend the City of Roswell Code of Ordinances, Chapter 22.3, by adding Section 22.3.7 to establish and permit paid on-street parking in designated areas of the City of Roswell. Now, therefore, the Mayor and Council of the City of Roswell, pursuant to their authority, do hereby adopt the following ordinance. A new Section 22.3.7 is hereby created and added to the City of Roswell Code of Ordinances, which shall read as follows, text of which is incorporated herein by reference. And if approved, this will be the second reading.
Yes, sir.
That pretty much sums it up for implementation. Any specific implementation, we'll come back to committee for further guidance and council for approval.
Does council have any questions? Seeing no hands up, is there anyone in the public that would like to come forward and speak? Seeing no one approach, I'll bring this back to council. Additional comments, or do I have a motion?
Motion to approve item number 3.
Motion to approve by Councilmember Grower. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Tyser. All those in favor, please raise your hands. And it passes unanimously. I would like to state for the record that Councilman Judy was not in the room for the vote.
Next item is approval of a memorandum of agreement between the Federal Highway Administration and the Georgia Department of Transportation, the Georgia State Historic Preservation Officer, and the City of Roswell regarding cultural resources as part of the Historic Gateway Project. Mr. Del Ross.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This item is formalizing the mitigation requirements. It is a four-party agreement between the city, the state DOT, Federal Highway, and the state Historic Preservation Officer. There are 3 adverse impacts: the impacts to the tree canopy, the impacts to Ivy Mill ruins, and the impacts to a retaining wall and steps located on 373 South Atlanta Street. The specific mitigation requirements, if you'd like to see them, are in your packet, page 4A, stipulations. Section 1 is the archaeological requirements on the Ivy Mill ruins. Section 2 is the tree planting and maintenance plan, and Section 3 is reconstructing the stone retaining wall and steps. I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Del Ross. Does council have any questions? Seeing no hands up, is there anyone in the public that would like to come forward and speak? Yes, ma'am, please come forward.
Excuse me, Janet Russell, Roswell resident. First of all, I want to express my complete displeasure at the continuation of the Historic Gateway project. I sat on that committee for 15 months and met twice a month for 15 months, and this project has evolved from nothing we ever discussed. We've heard every complete BS there is about why we need to widen this road, put in a 16-foot median, and I'm here to tell you that it's not true. I get a thing called LA Curbed, which is about traffic in Los Angeles. And I've often said Atlanta and Los Angeles, the only difference is they have palm trees and we have pine trees. It's suburban sprawl. I'm frequently there. So in the May issue of LA Curbed, they discussed the Sepulveda Pass widening, which took a decade and cost $1 billion to build on the 405. If any of you have been to LA, you know the 405. Traffic, since it opened 5 years ago, has not improved, and in fact, they added the lane, and it has increased all times of the day now instead of commuter times. Average commutes have increased, but not decreased. Average speeds have stayed the same or increased. Now, we're told that this 4-laning is going to make things better on Highway 9. They've also done a study, and it has proven that increased capacity corresponds into increase in miles driven. Therefore, if you build it, they will come. So let me tell you what I'm opposed to with this MOA thing. First of all, that this was never, I just happened upon it when I glanced through the agenda tonight, and I was stunned because I have not heard about it before. So let me tell you, there is a thing called the Historic Byway designation in the state of Georgia, which was created after Eisenhower. We put in all the freeways and little towns were bypassed for roads, and shops and businesses and neighborhoods died. And there are criteria for the Historic Byways designation, and we are in the process of getting this corridor designated by the state of Georgia as a historic district byway. It includes history, archaeology, and business development. As you know, it is the historic entrance to the historic district, the largest historic district in metro Atlanta, 900 acres. We have a master plan of our historic district in process. Why are we proceeding one more minute until that plan is complete? Just pissing away the money. Sorry about the language, but that's how I feel. This route was the route of the Cherokee Indians long before the white man got here. Also, did you know that on the banks of Vickery Creek, down by the river, the body of Mac Brown was found in 1936 because he was a black man who was lynched, and they threw his body there. Think about it. We're just going to four-lane that road and say, oh, it's archaeological, but oh, we made a mistake. So sorry. I remember when they cut down a 200-year-old tree in front of Old Town, and the previous mayor said, it's just a tree, we can plant another one. Economically, if you widen this road, you will kill every single business between the square and the river. They are all family-owned businesses, so please don't tell me you are business-friendly and give Roswell, Inc. any more money, because you are not. Other cities have nothing and they're trying to create something, and Roswell has something and is doing their darndest to create it into nothing. You will make it a slum, an economic slum, because those properties will never sell because they're not deep enough to create any other businesses. You will do more destruction than Garrard and his Yankee soldiers ever did to this town. Why save the trees? Well, I learned that trees are watershed management. They are a welcome embrace to this city compared to crappy Sandy Springs or all of you who love Alpharetta so much. Trees are a natural calming device. They reduce CO2 emissions. If you lived in that corridor, which none of you do, you would understand that we won't be able to breathe once you widen that road, nor will we be able to sleep because we will hear cars 24/7. But you don't care because you live in subdivisions. We don't. We live in an evolving neighborhood, a real neighborhood of people of all races and religions and economic statuses, because the neighborhood has evolved. One house on my street is from 1840 and another one's from 2010. How dare you try to destroy our neighborhood because you don't think we matter, but the people of East Cobb matter more. Because when you four-lane a highway and dump it into East Cobb on Highway 120, that's what you're doing. You're not enabling people to pass through the square. It won't handle the traffic. You're telling us that the people of East Cobb are more important than we are. And we really do matter, people. We really do matter. This was never a GDOT-driven project. This was an RDOT project that RDOT took to GDOT. We are not happy. You were elected to be our representatives. You are not our leaders. Get that in your mind. Pay attention. You are not our leaders. You were elected to represent us.
Ms. Russell.
Yes, ma'am?
Your time is up.
Okay, well, let me just summarize, okay?
Well, no, your time is up.
Okay,
Thank
well,
you.
I'll be...
Is there anyone else that would like to come forward and speak? Yes, sir, please come forward.
Hello, I'm Jason Yowell, 5010 Old Oak Trace, Roswell, Georgia. Hello. Mic on? Do I have to turn it on?
Oh. Just speak into it.
Okay, there we go. I'd like to point out that in the memorandum that you're contemplating signing, it talks about certain things being unavoidable that require mitigation. And the incredible destruction that's contemplated for the national forest that abuts Highway 9 is completely avoidable. You do not need to have the multi-purpose path with the big beauty strip that turns it into just another big suburban highway. It's not necessary, it's not required. GDOT standards have all kinds of exceptions for things that have special importance and special impact if they are removed. The intersection improvement at the river is incredibly poorly designed, and if you look at the original consultant's concept for the single quadrant interchange, they had it not in the northeast quadrant, but the southwest quadrant, which did not require an additional crossing over Vickery Creek. The crossing over Vickery Creek is going to be incredibly environmentally intrusive. The multipurpose path on the National Forest side is going to be incredibly environmentally intrusive. It's easily avoidable. This was sold to the public as, well, there's not really much of an impact on the National Forest because the curb line on that side of the street doesn't change. But what was never talked about in the public presentation was how much grading and clearing would be required for the multi-purpose path on that side of the street. Even if you look at the right-of-way acquisition maps, that only tells you where they're going to acquire the right-of-way. And that is going to be necessary for the actual improvements. What's not shown on those is the extent of the construction easements that no doubt will be required to put that infrastructure in. I have more experience than probably anybody else in this room doing road work. And I can tell you, to do that multi-purpose path on that side of the street, you are going to clear cut the National Forest 30 to 40 feet behind the curb line. Right now, the National Forest literally starts 3 feet off the curb line. It is the only highway, state highway in Georgia that has a National Forest commencing 3 feet off the edge of the pavement. That's a pretty unusual condition. When you drive into Roswell, you feel like you're driving into Roswell. And to sign a memorandum of agreement saying, well, we're going to mitigate the things that are unavoidable, you're being disingenuous because you don't have to mitigate it, you just don't have to take it out. And it really doesn't have a material impact on this project beyond seriously reducing the cost of it. There are other features to this project that are ill thought out. You don't need 30-foot curb and gutter. You can do with 24-inch curb and gutter. That saves you a foot of impervious surface for the entire length of the roadway. And state DOT guidelines say that if you can mitigate that additional width of gutter requirement by putting in more catch basins. I think we're better off putting in more catch basins than having more unnecessary impervious surface in that corridor. This is just a disaster waiting to happen, and you're wanting to sign a memorandum going, well, we're going to mitigate a disaster that we don't have to have because we haven't thought it out fully. It's, I keep hearing, oh, we've been doing this for 20 years, it's set in stone, nothing can change, but you need to put a full pause on this project and reopen it, because in none of the public presentations I went to was the full impact of tree clearing and grading made readily apparent to the public. And I think if you went down and had the surveyor mark the limits of clearing and grading
Thank you,
with the
sir.
ribbon,
Your time's up. Thank you.
people would be shocked.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to come forward and speak? Yes, please come forward.
Hi. Hello. My name is Ashok Nagrani. I'm a longtime resident of Roswell, and I have lived in Roswell since 1973. I have a commercial strip on South Atlanta Street, which is the Gateway Project, which is part of the Gateway Project. The plans as they are drawn right now will take away about 12 feet of my property. And since I only have 1.17 acres, that's going to make a big impact on the future sellability of that property. Also, this will include cutting down a 75-year-old willow oak, which would be a travesty. Because when I talked to the Georgia DOD people, they said, oh, we'll plant a sapling out there, which is going to grow up into a tree 25 years from now. But in the meantime, this beautiful tree that's out there, which is 75 years old and is in perfectly healthy shape, is going to be cut down. Now, the two properties east of mine are going to be even more severely impacted than my property is going to be. They're not here to defend the case, but I can tell you the design of this entire project is overly ambitious. Why do we need 2 roundabouts within the space of a quarter of a mile? And then to have the wide expanse of the road, of pathways on the side with a divider between the 4 lanes is beyond me. So my recommendation to the council is please put a stop to this overly ambitious project and do a more reasonable design so that we property owners are not impacted so gravely. The value of my property is going to be very, very severely impacted, and there's no compensation for that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else that would like to come forward? Yes, ma'am, in the front row. I would like to remind everyone to identify yourself and your address, but also fill out a comment card and leave it up at the podium. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Trousdale, 40 Willow Springs Lane.
If you could speak into the microphone, that'd be, thank you.
King Trousdale, 40 Willow Springs Lane, a resident for 34 years. My background does not have that much research to it, but I was drawn to Roswell because of the quaintness of the entrance, the history, the beauty, and to me, driving over the river and seeing a national forest on the right-hand side of the road with the old trees is a huge positive impact for the gateway. And to see that destroyed in any way is a travesty, in my opinion. The idea of using some of that space of the magnificent old trees to put in a central lane with crepe myrtles or something in it is just absurd. It doesn't balance. It is not what draws. You see those everywhere, but you don't see a national forest. Secondly, driving up the hill, and where you climb and climb, and as soon as it levels out, what you see is a bit of a traditional Baptist church, which we live in the Baptist, or the Bible Belt, have some of the biggest churches here. And like I think the Methodist Church has the largest building in the Southeast here in town. And that seems to need to be respected and part of the gentility and the atmosphere of this town we're trying to sell to others to come. And the third thing is probably the most beautiful lawn in Roswell is at the Thousand Hills Coffee Shop right by the church, which the plan is to butcher the hillside and put up on a new utilitarian kind of ugly wall that confronts someone coming into town instead of opening up and having a smooth flow. A practical suggestion of mine is that instead of having the anxiety of more accidents of the curve in the road by the Thousand Hills coffee shop and the church, is to straighten the road more so it doesn't have the fast speed and the turn that has caused deaths and terrible physical damage to people having wrecks there. But if you straighten the road more or just simply put a red light there with maybe a 20-second interval to let a few cars out of the neighborhoods, which are not large, that would, to me, solve the problem better and make it more attractive and enjoyable to come into the city and preserve what is our wealth. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there anyone else that would like to come forward? Yes, ma'am.
If I could have 5 minutes, please. Is that okay? We could reset the clock. Good evening. My name is Sally McKenzie. I live at 47 Goulding Place in historic Roswell. And I was blindsided too with the MOA on the agenda. I was under the impression from the transportation meetings in the Transportation Committee meetings held in November that there were going to be plenty of public engagement opportunities and even an animated video or some sort of something to really explain to the public what the Gateway project was. That has not happened, which is unfortunate because this is so important, and everybody who talks about it says, oh my gosh, yes, it's so dangerous, we got to do something. And there is, I'm pretty sure, 100% agreement on that something, that safety-wise, something needs to be done. We need to make amendments, but I don't think that people understand the massiveness of this project. I don't think people understand what it is going to do to the entrance to our historic district and to the forest and the tree canopy that is a jewel that I don't think any other city in Georgia or possibly the country has. It is amazing. And to think that we are going to cut into it and start it off with massive grade separation at the river where you enter into Roswell, it's mind-boggling. And my take on it, this process has been ongoing for so long, and it has been led by RDOT and supported by GDOT, whose primary focus is, the safety and the transportation of people from A to B. I don't know that economic development, protection of our key characteristics, and the amazing places and spaces in our city that make us special are their top priority, or that they have an understanding of how important they are to Roswell. So I am hopeful that this project is not set in stone. I did note that at the November, the one open house that was held, all of the posters said proposed, that showed the plans. So I'm hopeful that there is opportunity to improve these significantly. And just going back to the width, to the massiveness of this project and how it relates to the scale of historic Roswell, which is a village-scale town. green spaces and our connection to the outdoors and the rivers the river is so important. This proposed road is as wide as 120, Marietta Highway 120, and it's wider at the two successive roundabouts, 130-ish feet of pavement and some green stuff in the middle that will hopefully be kept up. So I also wanted to add that if we could get a specific explanation of how this plan was considered to be context sensitive, as this MOA is based on that, that would be helpful. I do not see how it's context sensitive at all. Anything that we can do to mitigate the width and breadth of this project, we really need to be looking at. And the grade separation, which is an incredible transportation tool, it works in so many places. It is also it also impacts our character in a big way. I could just see spending that money on grade separation at Holcomb Bridge and 9 and doing Roswell a huge favor, sending the freight trucks and the cars down Holcomb Bridge, a road that is intended for that kind of traffic. I also noted at the transportation meetings that the three key things that Mr. Asenbrack talked about as the reasons for needing this were safety, and then the number two were moving cars through Roswell and freight trucks. I want to bring cars and people to Roswell to spend money. I don't want them to speed through Roswell. I think we all want that, and we have an amazing opportunity right there. We have such a great opportunity. I also could care less about getting a freight truck to Whole Foods in Marietta. That was a quote by one of the council members. They should be considering alternative routes rather than coming through the historic district. And I don't think that we need to put our context, the context of Roswell, our historic character and aesthetic character and natural beauty in jeopardy so that we can get these freight trucks through Roswell.
Ms.
That's
McKenzie,
it.
great,
you.
because I gave you an extra minute because of your malfunctioning equipment up here. So
That's
thank
all I
you.
wanted to say.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
Is there anyone else that would like to come forward? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. My name is Greg Voinovich. I live at 620 Grimes Bridge Landing. I've been in Roswell for over 2 decades. The reality with this area is what it is. It's a difficult situation, and the random existence of a ford across the Chattahoochee River at that area is why we have a bridge there now. That's why the Roswell Mill was built there, because Vickery Creek comes through there. And here we are 100 years later, and we have this situation. From Cumberland Mall to Peachtree Corners, there are only 5 bridges that cross the Chattahoochee River. I-285, Johnson Ferry, Roswell Road, Georgia 400, and Holcomb Bridge, that's it. From the north side to going south, there's only 5 places across the river, and we're one of them. I live on Grimes Bridge Road. It continues to get worse. I've lived here for over 2 decades. I am trapped 2 out of 5 business days a week. I really appreciate how hard everyone's trying to get this done. For over 20 years, we've been trying to fix this problem. There is no way from where I live to get out of there unless something gets done. I can appreciate a lot of folks feel that there's a lot of terrible things being done for this. There's going to be no solution that does not cause some amount of trees to be removed, some amount of curbing to be installed, some amount of additional traffic. Whether people from East Cobb transiting through Roswell, Georgia or not, I really don't care. All I know is that there are people that have to transit through this point. I'm one of them on occasion. Other people aren't. If they live in that area, I'm very sorry. That's unfortunate. It's been like this for decades. If they live in that area and traffic is continuing to get worse, it's very unfortunate. I'm sorry that they have that. That's just the way it is. The forest coming down, that's unfortunate. If you all have lived here for any period of time, in 1999, we had a terrible drought. Pine beetles devastated that entire forest. My back property line is there. I had 200, the National Forest Service came in and removed 200 feet of trees along everyone's back property line. So if you're going to talk to me about 30 or 40 feet of trees along a road, I mean, We do this on a regular basis. It's the cycle of life with trees, so I'm not too worried about that. You're never going to make everybody happy. This needs to get done. It's unfortunate. I'm very supportive of something happening. I would like it to happen. These improvements that y'all planning on making on the lower square, I mean, people are going to be unhappy. It's a tough job y'all have. Y'all are the ones that we've elected to be our representatives to do this. There's going to be a lot of people that are going to come here and be unhappy about it. Please get it done. I live with it on a regular basis. I don't think it's going to cause more traffic. I think a really nice view is to have a regular, normal commute that's not terrible in the morning. We're not LA. We're Roswell, and I think all these things that are happening are going to be improvement. That's it. I've got my note here for you, too.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Oh, one last moment. I recall being in this exact same room maybe a decade ago with my son. I have my other son here today who's a scout. We were here for scouts. I was in this room and people were complaining about the fact that we were planning on taking down the Fraser Street apartments. Who here remembers the Fraser Street apartments? How terrible that was going to be to the entire nature of our community, what a terrible devastation that was going to be. I was one of the people that spoke up and said, are you crazy? The Fraser Street apartments, taking that down is a bad thing? I mean, it was crazy that people were against that. But like I said, everyone has their own right and their own opinion, and that's why they have vanilla and chocolate ice cream. People are entitled to their own opinion. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else that would like to come forward and speak? Seeing no one approach, I'll bring it back to council. Are there additional comments? Yes, Councilmember Grower.
So just want to follow up with a few of the comments I heard tonight and just get staff's opinion on some of these. So the first one is, I did mention the rendering the last time Gateway came up in this room, and I know that's something that is on the agenda. Can you update us on the status on the rendering of the project?
The renderings are underway. The renderings should be delivered to staff next month. We're planning on bringing those to you in the next month or two.
Okay. Is the proposed road as wide as 120, Georgia 120?
I don't know the answer to that. It's a little bit different context where Georgia 120 is not as bicycle and pedestrian friendly as this project will be. There are sections of Georgia 120 where the median is much wider than what we're proposing through the historic district here. There are sections of 120 that they're doing crepe myrtles along the middle, and there are some things that we will not be doing as part of the Gateway project, namely crepe myrtles. State Route 120, I do not know the number of the feet of right-of-way offhand.
If staff could work on that, I think that'd be, unless Mohammed, you know more.
Yes, we will work on that, but in general, I can tell you that the width of the median that is proposed and has been designed is the absolute minimum the state DOT would allow, where it was the cities and the residents' request to have a tree canopy on the median. So that median is the narrowest possible to have trees, not just bushes. To have proper trees, it takes time for the trees to grow, but that's absolute minimum width we could have of a median on a state road to have trees in the middle, and that's what the residents and the council at the time wanted when we started the design. But
Okay.
we will compare the two footprints of Future Highway 9 and the State Road 120 as it exists.
Okay. The comment regarding the clear cutting of forest is, I know that there's still a lot that is to be determined in terms of construction of this, but the residents' comment regarding it being 30 to 40 feet of forest being clear cut, is that accurate? Is that not something you can answer at this point?
That is not accurate along the entire frontage of the national park. There are some areas. It's a function of topography, and if you can picture yourself driving north over the river, once you pass Riverside, there is a section of forest that is significantly lower than the road. And as you go further north past Allenbrook and get up into the flatter area, the topography of the land is much flatter and much closer to the road grade. So the width of clearing decreases as you go up the hill. It is not 30 to 40 feet across the entire national park frontage.
Are there points where it is 30 to 40 feet?
I don't know offhand. There could be some sections 30 to 40 feet closer to the intersection with Riverside Azalea. I will say that the details of the impacts on this project since the public information open house in 2012 have been very consistent. There's no effort by staff to add anything that was not shown in public meetings at the church and other sites going all the way back to 2012. I will say also that the national park has been integrated into this project since day one. There is no way to build 4 lanes on this road without impacting some land owned by the National Park Service. They have been on board since day one, and they continue to support this project.
I'm not going to have any outbursts from the audience. You'll be asked to be removed if it continues.
So I want to clarify one more thing, that this is a safety improvement project. Although we will add a 4th lane to the project, but that capacity already exists as of today. In the morning, there is 2 lanes going south, and in the afternoon, there is 2 lanes going north. That situation does not change. So although we add a 4th lane, but the operation in the morning peak, when it's needed, 2 lanes go south, and in the afternoon, 2 lanes go north in the current situation and in the future situation.
Does the, and I'm sorry if I'm taking up too much time. Okay. I didn't know if anyone else had any questions. I just have a lot on this. So, the comments regarding the project being, quote, set in stone, can you kind of describe where we are in the overall life of this project? You know, are there opportunities for modifications, aesthetic things like that, or do you believe that at this point where we are is that this cannot be changed?
This project began in 2010 by a city-led effort to fix this problem. This concept is approved by the city. We gave it to the state. We coordinated with the state the entire time. This section that we're moving forward with right now is the narrowest possible section that the Georgia DOT will approve. Right now, the state DOT is in the right-of-way acquisition process. The gentleman that owns the commercial development is correct. Georgia DOT, for all 60 parcels impacted by this project, is required to get appraisals and do negotiations per federal code, the same way they would do on any other project. That negotiation has been underway for about a year, and the state DOT gave themselves 2.5 years to complete negotiation. To answer the project, is the project set in stone? In our world, projects are never set in stone. Changes are made all the time. We are not against finding ways to improve this project. Projects change during construction all of the time. There is never a time where we're going to say something is set in stone.
And does approving this tonight set this farther in stone, or is this essentially an administrative process at this point?
Staff will continue to work with the state, work with every individual parcel on this corridor to work through details on parking, on trees, on landscaping, on any individual concern that is brought up during the negotiation process. This document you see before you tonight is an administrative document required by the National Environmental Protection Act to move the environmental process forward. That is all it is.
Okay, great. And then I just have one comment regarding the trucks. The challenge we face with the trucks is this is a state highway. It is a truck route. It is the truck route. Roswell is on a state highway, and so is Alpharetta. That's what the state pays, partially why the state builds these roads, is for trucks to transit the area. And as much as we would like to have no trucks in our city, I personally don't think that's feasible, and this is a road that is essentially designed to accommodate motorists, but also to accommodate freight traffic, as much as it is undesirable to have it coming through our city. So that's all the questions I have. Thank you all. Thank you very much for answering them so well.
Good job, Councilmember Grower, for clarifying some things. Are there additional questions, comments from council? Yes, Councilmember Judy.
So this MOA this evening is not giving anybody carte blanche or setting a situation that would take any kind of input out of our hands moving forward with this project. It's just setting forth due to an EPA regulation.
Given that what I've heard tonight probably most consistently is the impact on trees, I'll point you towards packet page 79, section 2, tree planting and maintenance plan. I think it's very good that we have state DOT's commitment to working with our designers and working with staff to restore the canopy and plant as many trees as we possibly can.
Sure, but I guess what I'm asking is, in this maintenance plan, tree planting and maintenance plan, they will work with staff along with this MOA?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Additional questions, comments from council? Councilmember Grower, do you have a motion?
Motion to approve the item as written.
Motion to approve by Councilmember Grower. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Judy. All those in favor, please raise your hands. And it is Judy, Palermo, Grower, and Tizer in favor. All those opposed? Councilmember Wilsey. The motion carries. The next item on the agenda is the city attorney's report.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have a recommendation for closure to discuss personnel litigation and real estate.
Do we have a motion for closure?
Motion for closure?
Motion by Councilmember Tizer. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Wilsey and Councilmember Grower. All those in favor, please raise your hands. It passes unanimously. We are adjourned.